Our scripture reading for today comes from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. And so as I read this to you, listen for the living God speaking to you. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and we have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. And they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For so it had been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the expected time when the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and they paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Family, this is the word of God. So, earlier this week, my family and I finished all of our Christmas shopping. And we spent one night earlier this week wrapping all of the presents so that we could get them under the tree. And to be honest, we did this a little bit later this year than normal. Because when I get that tree up, I immediately get that anxiety. Because the tree, even though it's full of its ornaments and all of its lights and decorations, it just looks a bit naked without the gifts under it. So, quite often in December, it's the early part of the month that we try to go and we try to get all the gifts and wrap them so that they can spend as much time under the tree as possible. Now, this is in stark contrast to when I was a kid, because it was always a special form of torture to see these gifts underneath the tree, and I had to sit there and look at those gifts for like 3 weeks. One year, I even decided that I was going to take a peek at all of my gifts that were under the tree, and so I very carefully took the Scotch tape off, and I looked in the boxes just to see what I was getting. The only problem was that after I took that off, the tape wouldn't stick back. And so when my brother discovered this and he went to go tell my mom, the only excuse I could give was, it must have been the humidity. The humidity in Minnesota in the middle of the winter. My mom still gets me for that. But times have changed for me. I've grown a little bit older, maybe a little bit wiser, and I love to see those gifts under the tree, and I do like to have them there as long as possible, because whenever I look at them, I am reminded of the love that I have for all of my family and the love that my family has for me. I think the giving and the receiving of gifts has been one of the oldest Christmas traditions, and it's something that even those who are not spiritual or religious, it's something that they take part in the Christmas holiday. Just in America alone, we're expected to spend about $465 billion on gifts this year. So gift giving is really important. And we're going to talk about gifts and Christmas gifts today. As we look at this really familiar passage in Scripture. This is one of those passages that we read almost every Christmas, because it's one of the stories of how Jesus came into this world. So last week we looked at another familiar passage as the angels had appeared to the shepherds tending their flock, and they delivered this good news of great joy. Well, today we're going to follow along with the wise men, and we're going to focus on the gifts that they gave to Jesus. And in doing so, we're going to discover what the first Christmas gift was and what I like to think is the best Christmas gift ever given. Now, when we look at this story of the wise men, we always focus on these three gifts that they gave. In fact, if you look in Scripture, it doesn't say three wise men. We always say three wise men, and we don't know how many wise men showed up, but what we know is that they gave three gifts: gold, and frankincense, and myrrh. Now, we know what gold is, but for those wondering what frankincense and myrrh are, they're spices. They were very expensive spices that were used back then to burn incense in religious ceremonies. And so when the wise men were giving Jesus these gifts, they were making a couple statements. And the first is just in the cost, or how expensive these gifts were. They were trying to give Jesus the most honor possible by giving them their most treasured and expensive commodities. But it's also making a statement about who they believed Jesus to be, because in giving of the frankincense and the myrrh, it was their way of proclaiming that they believed that Jesus truly was the Son of God. So when we look at gold and frankincense and myrrh, we can see that these were pretty amazing gifts that they gave. These were pretty good Christmas gifts. All beautiful, all valuable. But those were not the first Christmas gifts ever given. Because if we want to look at the first Christmas gift ever given, we need to look at this story in its entirety. We always focus on this moment when the wise men saw Jesus and they were overwhelmed with joy and they give these gifts. But if we look at the beginning of this chapter, we see that the original intention for these wise men were to be spies. We know that King Herod, once he found out that this baby was born and that this baby was prophesied to be the ruler over all of Israel, we see that he became afraid. And so he got these wise men together and he said, why don't you go find this baby so that I can pay him homage? And I use that word in heavy quotations because in reality what we know is that Herod was just trying to find this threat to his rule and to neutralize it and to kill Jesus. But something happened along the way. And at some point, the wise men were faced with a decision. They could continue to follow their earthly ruler, or they could choose to follow their heavenly ruler. And when they saw Jesus lying there in a manger, they were overwhelmed with joy and they decided to follow Jesus. So before they gave gold or frankincense or myrrh, the wise men gave Jesus their complete and utter devotion. And that is the first Christmas gift. And I dare say it's the best Christmas gift because it's the thing that Jesus wants most. You know, part of walking our faith journey, part of being a Christian, is an effort to follow Christ. And just as we give gifts to each other to show how much we love and we care for one another, I think our life is all about trying to give these gifts to God in an effort to show how much we love Him. And every day is an opportunity to give God gifts. Sometimes we give Him the gift of our time. Sometimes we give Him the gift of good deeds or loving others. Sometimes we give the gift of financial blessings if we're in a spot where we can do that. We do all of this to show God how much we love Him and to show how grateful we are for His presence in our lives. And all of these gifts are very beautiful. They're just like gold and frankincense and myrrh. Nothing wrong with them. But more than anything, what God desires from us, before we give Him all of this other stuff, is simply our devotion and our willingness to follow Him. Especially when it might put us at odds with what others are telling us. God wishes for our devotion, especially when it might mean getting outside of our comfort zone or confessing that we have been wrong. More than anything, God wants our devotion, and that is the best Christmas gift that we can ever give. It was the first one ever given, and it was the best gift that we can continue to give today. And when we do, when we give God our devotion, when we genuinely try to follow Christ to the best of our ability, we will see that we will be consumed with this joy that God gives us. If we're looking at this passage and we're trying to figure out what changed the wise men's minds, we can look at verse 10. As they were walking, making their way to Jesus, and suddenly the star stopped. And they looked down and they saw baby Jesus. And they came face to face with the presence, the real presence of the Lord. And they were overwhelmed with joy. And it's that joy that gave them the courage to follow Jesus. In the same way, that's an opportunity that we have for us. Even if it doesn't make sense to us, even if we don't know where God is following us, it's a place that can bring us to joy. One of the joys that I have as a pastor is that I get to hear your stories when you tell me your stories. And I heard a story from a member this week, and he was telling me why he has become more involved in church. And he told me very simply, you know what, it makes sense. And I was really blown away by that, because it reminded me that we don't always know where God is leading us or why He is leading us. But what we do know is that if we follow Him, life just starts to make sense. And I think it's in doing that we can be brought to a place of joy. This joy that we can experience as we celebrate Christmas, but it's a joy that we can experience every day until the day that Jesus comes again. So as we approach the Christmas holiday, I would like to ask all of us to reflect on what gifts are we bringing to Jesus. May all of us give that best Christmas gift so that we can be filled with joy until the day that He comes again. Advent blessings to us all. Amen.